Hey, I got a bit of a head cold. Sorry, so if I suddenly squirt snot, don't be alarmed. I will try to break the video if I have to do anything weird. Today I'm going to talk about a tournament coming up in Sweden. Swedish bold action for me has really kicked off the last few years because the Swedes have gotten together a national team and attended the WTC. We've been over a couple of times for different tournaments, and they come over this year for tournaments here in Denmark. It's fairly easy to get to Denmark from Sweden, so unless you're in the northern part of Sweden, then it's a long way to go. But so I've started following a bit of Swedish events, and this one is a small tournament that is a memorial tournament for a World War II soldier that one of the organizers actually got to meet. So let's go and see what they are doing. Here we go. So this is the META of Major Bob Filby's memorial tournament. The event itself is a blue-on-blue, full competitive event with the added bit that it's an 871-point tournament, which is just odd. Like, it's a really odd number, and that's fun. I mean, that's just fun, because how are you going to spend 871 points? That 1 point, right? It's just weird. It's single generic reinforced platoon. They've got a 16 order dice cap, which I think is plenty for 871 points. And they've got 10 players. So it's a small local tournament in Ole. And they are playing 3 games: meeting engagement, penetrating strike, which is, if I remember correctly, a version of double envelopment, where you can't actually leave the board or something like that. And timely objectives, which is the one where you score points for being on the objectives every single turn. Right. The order dice for the lists that I've seen were between 9 and 16. I think 9 is too low for 871 points. The average was 13.1. I think you could get away with 12 maybe. But in lower point games, it's really beneficial to have a high order dice count, because whatever you're going to face is not going to be massively powerful anyway, because it's not, you don't have the points to spend on heavy tanks or whatever, right? So like, going high, I think, is of huge benefit in this tournament. 13.1 is still fairly good. I see a lot of tournaments where 13.1, that would be okay for like 1,000 points. There are 3 Soviet nations, 3 Soviet lists going, 3 American, 2 German, only 1 British, which was a little bit of a surprise, but I mean, for a small tournament, it's really what people have in their collections, right? 1 British, 1 French. So a fairly good spread of 5 nations. No real minors, which it's a little bit of a pity, but I mean, it's not massively skewed towards one direction here. Now the builds, since this is a full-on competitive tournament, there's no holding back. Like, there are no restrictions. I had expected there to be maybe a few more of the players who would bring a like a list that's skewed to doing one thing really well, but we see a lot of mixed bags. So there was like 5 army builds that has what I would term a mixed bag, or a skirmish unit, or maybe even attempts at what I call greatest hits, where you take 2 of everything that's good. You can't really do that with a single generic platoon, but there's at least 1 Soviet army that tries to do this anyway. And then there's a couple of non-competitive army builds, I would say, like veteran spam, where you take veterans, but they're not like one of the good veteran units, one of the veteran units that like really benefit you, Gurkhas or whatever. They're just veterans. So veteran spam is not normally something that you do well with, and that will push your order dice count down in this pack. So maybe not like the most competitive, and it's not a build that I often see in competitive tournaments. There are 2 camping armies, so armies that have a lot of range, a lot of Daka, maybe even LMGs on some of the infantry units, sitting back, shooting at the enemy, hoping and praying that that will be enough. This build might be a thing that will do a comeback at some point. Right now in the international competitive meta, it's not really working out. But in local metas, it really can do well, especially if you don't have armies that can deal with that. There's 1 assault army and 1 army that leans a little bit into the barbecue, but not over like massively so. It's a lot more mixed bag actually. So those are the builds. For me, the list ranking goes between 2 non-competitive to a 4.5, a really strong competitive army. The average being a 3.3. So fairly good. That's what we're seeing in many tournaments like that. There's a lot of good army lists out there. I think, not that I'm saying that people are net listing, but I think a lot has been learned from the WTC creating an international scene for bold action, where a lot of the metas can sort of clash and try out different things, and that has really upped people's game for their list buildings. For me, the predictions is that Jeremy with his 12 order dice Brits, that's Gurkha plus armor. I mean, that's always going to do well, especially if Jeremy knows his stuff. And I've met Jeremy, he is okay. That's a 4.5. CJ with his 15 order dice Russians, which has like so much infantry in the list. That's a 4. Also a really nice build. Joachim's 15 order dice Russians, which is the one that's sort of like the greatest hits. He takes a little bit of everything. Also a really good build. And if he's a good skirmish player, then that can really do well. I think that's a 4. Johan with his 16 order dice France, which has a lot of vets and a lot of Daka, also can do really well. 4. And Simon's 16 order dice USA mixed bag. Americans mixed bag, that can always, like, it can really bring, it can win you tournaments, but it can also like not go anywhere. So it's, for me, it's a 3.5. Depending on the player, that can bring you to the top or not. I think in this case it might just give Simon a boost. So these 5 are the players I would expect to do well in the tournament. We shall see. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and yeah, that's it for me today. I'll go and be sick. Cheers.